Thank you so much. It's nice to see a lot of familiar faces in the audience. I'm honored to be speaking to you this afternoon, and I congratulate New Jersey on its 19th Aviation Conference. All of us are well aware of the serious issues facing our industry: the declining number of pilots, an aging pilot population, the 60 to 70% dropout rate among students, aviation businesses struggling to stay open, airports engaged in constant battles against unfavorable economic, political, and national security environments. Seize the day, build for tomorrow could not be a more timely theme for this symposium. The panel lineup, a more appropriate agenda. I was pleased to see education kick off the panel discussions. Education, after all, drives everything else on the agenda. Better education on the value of general aviation can lead to favorable policies. Better education on the importance of risk management can improve safety. And better education on beneficial technologies can facilitate their adoption and widespread use. Today I want to share my thoughts on three things. First, the profound effect flying can have on a person's life. Second, the belief some of us have that creating more pilots is the best way to save general aviation. And third, the imperative all of us should see for airports to become indelible parts of their communities. As the education panel reaffirmed this morning, flying has the power to transform lives. The flying effect is real and it is measurable. Learning to fly has certainly given purpose to my life, not to mention the confidence to stand here today. Aviation has allowed me to interact with remarkable people and to see and do some amazing things. To savor the crisp, pre-dawn stillness of the Borrego Desert before an aerobatic contest. Spin a Cessna T-41 alongside Montana's Sleeping Giant. Roll an Aero Subaru while pointed at Japan's Mount Fuji. Marry my best friend at the end of an autumn day of float flying around Rangeley, Maine. Shoot landings in a tiger moth on the grass in New Zealand. Receive the following clearance on a windy day in Southern California. Touch and goes approved, any runway, any direction. Even though I now call Idaho home, my journey in aviation started here in New Jersey. I was born and raised in Newton and graduated from Blair Academy. On a rainy afternoon in 1969, I remember huddling around the television in the Minnesink Lodge on Fairview Lake, spellbound as Neil Armstrong stepped onto the moon. The first air shows I attended were at Sussex Airport in the 1970s. Years later, I returned there to begin flight training in a Piper Cherokee 140, soloing on October 16, 1982. My first aerobatic lessons took place in a decathlon from Caldwell Airport. Against her better judgment, my instructor finally allowed me to solo. My first attempt at unsupervised aerobatics went something like this. The loop barely went around. The spin didn't. And the roll ended up 90 degrees off the original heading. My knees were knocking against the stick all the way back to the airport. Even so, not only was I able to fly an airplane by myself, I was able to do something that vaguely resembled aerobatics. For me, a childhood dream had been realized. I relocated to California soon after. As you can see, I was overjoyed when my wife suggested that I leave my engineering job to give flight instructing a try for a year. That was 1987, and I have been a full-time aviation educator ever since. This segues into my second topic. Many of the programs that are attempting to improve general aviation are aimed at growing the pilot population. Such efforts might seem to be an obvious solution, but I wonder how much sense it makes to keep trying to fill airplane seats when nearly 70% of new students will drop out before their check ride. Please don't misunderstand. I'm all for having more pilots out there, provided they are well trained. But no industry can grow, much less sustain itself, when it keeps losing 70% of its new customers. There were 120,000 student pilots in 2012. About 80,000 of them, if they haven't already, will drop out. What if we worked on retaining a greater number of those who are already walking through the doors of our flight schools? If we could cut the dropout rate in half, tens of thousands more student pilots would make it to the next level. We would have considerably more pilots if aviation marketed to women as well. Women represent less than 7% of the pilot population. Yet according to Forbes, women drive 70 to 80% of all consumer spending. We should take a page from the National Football League's playbook. In 2002, only 14% of NFL fans were female. So the league launched a campaign to attract more women. The NFL fan base has since grown to 185 million, 45% of whom are now female. A third of the avid fans are now women. NFL apparel sales to women have tripled over the last 4 years. And more women tuned in to watch last year's Super Bowl than tuned in to watch the Oscars and Emmys combined. I've mentioned 2 things we could do to grow the pilot population: keep more of our current customers and appeal to the other half of the population. That might sound simple enough, but it ignores the reason why students are dropping out at such an alarming rate. It is not because of the cost of flying. It is not the lack of access either, though reducing cost and increasing access certainly are important factors. The majority of pilots leave aviation because they are not receiving sufficient value for their time and money. According to the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, more often than not, quality eclipses cost. At the same time, AOPA found the quality of flight instruction to be a persistent problem and a weak link in the chain. Educational quality, in other words, how instructors ply their trade, drives nearly half of a pilot's assessment of his or her flight training experience. Educational quality combined with customer focus drive nearly 75% of the overall training experience. Students have been sending a clear message for a long time. As a whole, instructors have not been very good at their job. In my experience, this is an accurate assessment. I see 2 main causes for this: misunderstanding who our customers are, and policies that have not served general aviation well. 70% of pilots learn to fly for either recreational or business reasons. Only 1 in 4 becomes an airline transport pilot, and only 1 in 13 belongs to the Airline Pilots Association, the largest airline union in the world. Yet we tend to treat everyone who wants to fly as if they will be driving airliners crammed with passengers. At the same time, long-standing policies that promote flight instructing as the quickest path to an airline career have had serious unintended consequences on flight training. One has been to divide the training community into teachers and time builders. Teachers are those instructors who develop and demonstrate expertise at their craft, even if some of them aspire to an airline career. Time builders, on the other hand, exploit a regulatory incentive merely to log hours. They are forced by flawed policy into doing something they don't really care to do: teach others how to fly. This has resulted in an artificial oversupply of instructors, which has suppressed the quality of training and instructor pay and contributed significantly to the student attrition rate. The good news is more stakeholders are finally putting general aviation and its customers first. The light sport aircraft movement is striving to make it easier and cheaper to fly. The Open Airplane Network is making rental aircraft more accessible to qualified pilots across the U.S. Redbird Skyport is exploring new and more efficient ways of delivering training using simulation. The General Aviation Pilot Protection Act would substitute driver's licenses for third-class medicals, and efforts are underway to simplify Part 23 certification requirements. The Society of Aviation and Flight Educators Pilot Proficiency Project is one way all pilots can invest in recurrent training. SAFE has developed a needs-based mentoring program for instructors as well. SAFE also chaired a symposium to address issues such as flight training doctrine, standards, and curricula. And since 1997, the Master Instructor Continuing Education Program has challenged instructors to grow and develop as professional educators. We need to support and encourage more of these kinds of initiatives. Our industry also needs to adopt a customer-centric mindset and demand a lot better from our core of instructors. Otherwise, simply trying to funnel more students into a training pipeline that has been leaking like a sieve will have little to no effect on growing the pilot population. An even bigger question I want you to consider is this. Should making more pilots be the primary goal anyway? Or should more pilots end up being the byproduct of a concerted effort to position small airports as indispensable assets to their communities? This brings me to the third topic. To illustrate where I'm heading, let's do a simple mental exercise. Imagine a modern aircraft carrier. Raise your hands if you immediately picture supersonic jets catapulting off the deck. Who feels the thunder of the afterburners? Who has music from Top Gun playing in their heads right now? We are drawn to this as aviators. For that matter, it's hard for non-aviators not to be drawn into this kind of drama and excitement. It's where the action is, where really cool stuff happens. It's high profile too, and the pilots represent the best of the best. Now zoom out your mental picture and take in the entire aircraft carrier. This engineering marvel is 1,100 feet long. It's 20 stories tall, a floating city of 5,000 or 6,000 people, all with different jobs, yet all there to support about 70 aircraft and 120 pilots. Zoom out your mental picture even farther now. At least 4 other ships, crewed with upwards of another 2,000 people, sail as part of the carrier group, ultimately to support 70 aircraft and 120 pilots. Now imagine all of the unseen people and resources that go into designing and building all this stuff, that go into all the supplies and equipment and maintenance necessary to sustain this truly collaborative effort. Picture all those who train all those who work on the ships and fly the aircraft. This is a network of tens of thousands of people and hundreds of thousands of tons of material dedicated, in the end, to supporting just 70 aircraft and 120 pilots. I see the more than 5,000 public-use airports across the U.S. as aircraft carriers. Especially so when you consider that if we distributed our general aviation assets evenly among these airports, each would support about 40 aircraft and 120 pilots. But just like the picture that immediately comes to mind when we think of an aircraft carrier, too many people, including many of us within general aviation, only see airplanes and pilots. Given the huge supporting cast it takes just so relatively few of us can go flying, it's no wonder some pilots think the world revolves around them. There really are only a few occasions when the world does in fact revolve around the pilot. Spins and ground loops come to mind. But what happens to the relatively few airplanes and pilots if there is no support network, no team effort? We've all seen the results. Here in New Jersey, more than half of your public-use airports have disappeared since the 1950s. According to your General Aviation Commission, the leading cause of friction between airports and their communities isn't airplane noise, but a lack of communication between the two entities. More than 70% of your communities feel that airport owner-operators do not do enough to communicate the economic and aesthetic benefits of their airports. Even municipalities that view their airports as economic assets still chronically underestimate the economic impact those airports have on their communities. These issues are not unique to New Jersey, and if general aviation is to survive and even thrive, we must include all of the stakeholders and supporting assets in the solution. Otherwise, just like an unsupported aircraft carrier, many of our airports will remain adrift and vulnerable to attack. I suggest we start by sharing as often as we can the many wonderful things general aviation does. General aviation contributes more than $150 billion a year to the U.S. economy. New Jersey ranks 10th among the states with a total economic contribution of $4.4 billion a year. Our industry employs more than 1.2 million people. 2/3 of general aviation flying is business related, and most commercial airline pilots start in general aviation. Let's celebrate the members of our community who, by and large, are among the most generous and helpful people around. Volunteers have exposed nearly 2 million young eagles to flying. Angel Flight West serves 13 western states. In 2012 alone, it donated $2.5 million in services. 1/3 of its passengers are children or youth. Half are ethnic or cultural minorities. And 80% come from low-income or poverty-level environments. Since 1983, pilots with Angel Flight West have completed over 54,000 missions. They have logged more than 320,000 hours and 16 million miles. That's the equivalent of $40 million in flight costs donated by volunteer pilots and their commercial airline partners. And this is only one of several Angel Flight wings in the U.S. Pilots and Paws is a network of 3,200 pilots and 11,000 volunteers who transport animals by small airplane. And after natural disasters such as the earthquake in Haiti and Hurricanes Katrina and Sandy, General Aviation mobilizes to assist with relief efforts. We do many good things. It's time for us to play offense for a change. Every chance we get, let's show others how airports can and do support their communities. Let's show our communities how the airport environment can be used as a living laboratory for science, technology, engineering, math, and even art, that it is a viable resource accessible to everyone. I propose we redirect some of our passion away from the flying itself and focus on showing others the remarkable infrastructure that supports airplanes and pilots. And let's invest in the success of airport owner-operators, businesses, and instructors by coaching them in sound business practices. I've seen this happen at a few airports across the U.S., the handful that really get it. Perhaps the most famous example is Oshkosh. EAA and Whitman Field enjoyed tremendous support not only from the surrounding communities, but also from the state of Wisconsin itself. Another example is the Central Jersey Aviation Education Collaborative, a unique partnership between education and local businesses with a small airport as the focal point. One of their programs is an aviation science club. You heard a few members of the club speak this morning. We need to find creative ways to incentivize greater involvement by teachers, students, and local businesses in this and similar programs hosted by small airports everywhere. I'm not suggesting that every airport can or should become an Oshkosh, or that a collaborative would be viable in all cases. Nonetheless, we should learn from the success stories and strive to turn the exceptions into the rule. If we promote general aviation and actively engage our communities in this way, I believe more people will come to our airports. If we routinely demonstrate the airport's value, they will come. They will come to participate in aviation-themed events. They will come to experience practical applications of math and science, as well as the miracle of flight itself. Some may become pilots or airplane mechanics or even airport managers as a result. Some may be inspired to become engineers, scientists, artists. Others may be empowered to attain higher levels of achievement in their personal and professional lives. And others still will remember the positive interaction they had with their local airport. More importantly, they will come to the airport's defense should it ever be threatened. It's obvious that business as usual has not worked for a very long time. One thing I've learned doing thousands of spins with other pilots and being a flight facilitator for the Take Flight workshops is that breakthroughs in new learning are only possible when we move outside of our comfort zone. As uncomfortable and scary as it might seem, our industry can only grow if we take a risk and break away from the status quo. The Mid-Atlantic Aviation Coalition has taken a risk with this new 2-day conference format. Tomorrow, Linda Kastner and I will take a risk when we debut a totally new type of ground school at Alexandria Field. So let's risk broadening our thinking and becoming more inclusive with our outreach. Like it or not, the relatively few pilots in the aviation ecosystem must also recognize that we are the vanguard for general aviation. With that realization comes a duty for each and every one of us to approach our flying like professionals at all times. And remember, we don't have to convert everyone into pilots. We need advocates for general aviation, a lot of them. It's perfectly okay to foster an inviting and safe atmosphere where people want to come to the airport just to hang out. Many of us enjoy doing that ourselves. We need to understand and cater to the expectations of the next generation of student pilots as well. Through our actions, we've got to demonstrate to them that our community is committed to mitigating risk and behaving responsibly, that they will receive valuable education for their time and money, that our technology is familiar to them, and that the policies affecting their participation in general aviation make sense. This symposium is just a beginning. The work ahead will be hard, and not all of the things we will try will be successful. Yet if the aviation community is anything, it is galvanized into action whenever important work needs to get done. So let's educate ourselves and others about the value of general aviation. Let's focus on building stronger relationships between airports and communities first. Let's improve the profession of flight instructing. And then we will see the pilot population grow organically. How you proceed after this symposium can become a model for aviation stakeholders in other states. So I urge all of you to seize on the ideas presented today. Build on them before tomorrow is too late. Thank you.